Greetings, chess players. My name is Chris Torres, and I am a chess master who is very passionate about California chess history. So today I look forward to introducing you to another California chess historical figure on my Daily Chess Musings YouTube channel. Let me show you his picture right now. We're going to look at Dr. Walter Romaine Lovegrove, and I'm going to tell you why he's important. If I can pull up his picture. Here we go. Ah, there we go. Right next to the chessboard, the way I like it. Dr. Walter Romaine Lovegrove lived from 1869 to 1958. And he holds a significant place in California's chess history as a pioneering and influential figure whose contributions helped shape the early competitive chess scene in our state. Though professionally a dentist, Lovegrove's true legacy lies in his accomplishments on the chessboard and his role as a prominent California chess champion. In 1891, Lovegrove achieved national recognition when he defeated Joseph Redding, whom we talked about in our last episode, to claim the title of California chess champion with a commanding score of 7-1. This victory marked the beginning of his dominance in Western chess circles, a reputation he maintained through the period surrounding the First World War. During this era, chess was still developing in the Western United States, and Lovegrove served as a beacon of strength and skill in California, a region then largely unknown in the national chess landscape. What makes Lovegrove particularly noteworthy is the respect he garnered from some of the greatest chess players of his time. Renowned figures such as Emanuel Lasker, Harry Pillsbury, Frank Marshall, and J.W. Showalter visited California and played against Lovegrove at the Mechanics Institute in San Francisco. Their astonishment at his strength and skill underscores his caliber as a player and his importance as a representative of Western chess prowess during a formative period for the sport in the region. In recognition for his contributions and enduring skill, the United States Chess Federation later honored him with the title of Master Emeritus. Dr. Lovegrove's legacy as a trailblazing California chess champion and his role in elevating the state's presence in the national chess community make him a vital figure in California's chess history. His achievements helped lay the foundation for future generations and contributed to the rich tradition of competitive chess in California. So for our game today, I have chosen the game that Walter Lovegrove played against Emanuel Lasker. Now, both these gentlemen had a doctor title, so it's Dr. Walter Lovegrove and Dr. Emanuel Lasker. Lasker, of course, was world champion for 27 years straight. So having him come to San Francisco is of great importance. And the game took place on December 28th, 1902 in San Francisco, California at the Mechanics Institute. Let's take a look. Let's see how the game goes. Let me check my screens real fast. Oh, good. Still looks good. Check the other screen real fast. And that still looks good as well. Awesome. All right. So, Lovegrove starts with e4, getting a pawn in the center, controls the center square, and opens up diagonals for our bishop and queen. let's see. And Lasker plays e5. Certainly, we've seen this a lot. Knight f3, develop with the threat against the center pawn, get a knight out. Knights take a little while to get to where they're going. And knight c6, the most common opening you're going to see at a chess tournament. And then right here, Lovegrove has a lot of different ideas. He could play knight c3, like we've seen Capablanca do, 4 knights. d4, the Scotch game. Bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez. Bishop c4, like we've seen Greco do, the Italian. But he does play bishop b5. Okay, so the Ruy Lopez. If you remember, the Ruy Lopez, or Spanish game, is one of White's most popular openings and is named after the Spanish monk Ruy Lopez de Segura, who analyzed it in his journal in the 16th century. He analyzed many of the variations we play today. And then a6, the Morphy defense, named, of course, after Paul Morphy. And then we have bishop a4. So this is the most popular plan because it maintains the bishop. But, you know, honestly, you could, for sure, and I think I've mentioned this in other lessons, you could just take, and then you've got a Ruy Lopez exchange variation if you want to avoid some of the massive theory that is known about the bishop a4 move. Black develops a piece, black being Lasker, knight f6, and white castles. And here, let me look at my database real fast. Yeah, I only have a couple 100,000 master games in my database on this position. Only a couple 100,000. Knight takes e4. And we are in the open variation of the Morphy defense. And if that seems too dangerous for your tastes, moving the same piece twice in the opening to grab that center pawn, I just want to point out that bishop e7 or bishop c5 are perfect. You know, those natural bishop developing moves are also perfectly fine. Let's see. And then d4. So in this line, since white is castled and black cannot, it makes sense to immediately strike at the center. And then, oh, by the way, you know, taking on d4 would be a tremendous mistake. If knight takes d4, this is a trap that nobody falls for, but you should know. Knight takes d4, ex d4, and then what does white play? Well, rook e1. And this is a real problem. And especially since this is pinned, right? I mean, this is a really bad problem. I mean, maybe since d7's pinned, you try and play f5 to defend it, but then white could just play f3, right? So you don't want to take d4 in this variation. Of course, there's another way you could take, and that would be maybe ex d4, in which case I recommend rook e1. Then if they play f5 to defend it, you could take here. Knight takes d4, right? And notice you're threatening f5 with this, right? Now, I see in my database, as I'm putting this in right now, that I actually did play a game like this. Queen came out to h4. Let's see what happened. Oops, highlighted the wrong square. That's a double attack here. So I responded with bishop e3. And then knight takes d4. And then I did not take back right away. I played g3. Queen runs back to e7. And now I took. Queen takes d4. Queen goes to d6. Let's trade queens. And I played knight d2. Queen takes, bishop takes. I still have this pin, by the way. See that pin down the E file? Takes, bishop takes. Black played b5 here. And I actually just played knight takes e4, fx e4, rook takes e4. Is it check? They can't take my bishop because they are in check. King d8. And then I played bishop e3. And you can see, I don't want to show the whole game because this lesson's not about this game that I played in 2004, Torres versus Rutherford. This is Lovegrove versus Lasker. But you can see in this position, white's the only one with pieces developed on the chessboard. And let's see, 6 pawns for 6 pawns, but we're the only one with pieces developed. And we've got a rook in the open file. So I went on to win easily. So after d4, I showed you that you don't want to take like this. And I just showed you that taking like that, I could show you a bunch of games. It gives white a lasting advantage. So instead of taking d4 right away, you throw in this intermezzo if you're black. You play b5. You play b5. And then white, Lovegrove moves his bishop to b3. And that makes, you know, it still has its eyes on f7. And then black plays d5. Wow. This is an important move. I could talk a long time about this, but it's an important move because it takes space in the center, defends the e4 knight, right? And opens a path of development for the c8 bishop. So dx e5 is what Lovegrove plays, and then bishop e6. And we are in the main line of the open variation of the Ruy-Lopez, the Morphy defense. And what do I want to tell you about this? Well, it's really sharp. And black's pawn structure, first of all, this pawn is a little weak in this variation. And the a6, b5 pawns may not seem weak right now. They may not seem weak right now, but if you play a4 as white, you're going to be really undermining those pawns. And let's see, what else do I want to mention? Oh, yes, of course. If there is an eventual trade of knights, then the c7 pawn's going to be very weak. And furthermore, dark c5 and d4 squares are also weak. So why do people play this? Why is this a popular variation? Well, by people I mean, like Tarrasch, Botvinnik, Korchnoi, Yusupov, Anand. These guys all like this position as black. Why? Well, all those weaknesses that I pointed out, that's white's plan to capitalize on that. Black has really easy piece development. Really, really excellent piece play, as we like to say. This bishop has a lot of good squares. The queen has a lot of good squares. It's really easy to get your pieces to good squares as black, not so much as white. So it balances out. All right, let's see how those things play out. Lovegrove plays c3, and this is the most popular, according to my database, the most popular still to this day continuation. White's taking control of this d4 square. Remember we talked about that being a little weak for black. And now, if this knight goes here and there's an exchange of knights, white can put pressure on that weak c7 pawn with like a rook or a queen in the c file, and so it's a really good move. Following up on some of the things that I just highlighted on the last move, and black, as I said, they have easy ways to get their pieces in the game. Lasker plays bishop c5. Bishop comes out and is now positioned on the same diagonal as white's king. Knight b to d2. So white develops a knight toward the center while also aiming, hey, I don't like your knight in the middle of the board, Lovegrove, in the center. I wouldn't mind using my queen's knight to take it, do a trade there. Black castles. And white plays queen e2, adding a second attacker. I suppose, another way to add a second attacker, queen e2 gets the queen off the back ring, which is probably why he did it. But I suppose another way would be like bishop c2, right? You could certainly do that. So maybe like bishop c2, bishop f5, right? And then I might play a4, undermine those pawns. We talked about that earlier. And then if you're black, you got to be careful, because if pawn takes, right? These rooks are looking at each other. Bishop a7. I might play as black here. So that would be another way to add a second attacker. Let me make sure that my board matches. Sometimes when I look at variations with you guys, I end up making a mistake returning the position. And I shouldn't, because like it's on a digital board, right? But, sometimes I still do. Queen e2, 11, queen e2, 11, queen e2. It looks good. All right. And Lasker just takes. Too much pressure. I'm just going to take. Could he have defended? Yeah. And you know what? It might even be better, because you want to try and maintain this. Look, this knight's in the center of the board. It's in the quadrant of white's king. And you're double threatening f2. So why bail out on this knight right away? Maybe, bishop f5, add the support. And then again, white could play a4, and then we're kind of getting back into what I was just talking about. Slightly different variation, because the bishop's on b3, not on c2, but quite a bit similar. All right. Yeah. So, but he just played knight takes d2. Knight takes d2. I'm expecting bishop takes d2, and that is in fact what Lovegrove plays. So now Lovegrove, if you're keeping score at home, has a pawn in the center, is castled, and has unified his rooks. In other words, the 3 opening goals. Lasker plays f6. And clearly he wants to get rid of white's center pawn. But you know what? Moving Freddy forward, right, creates some weakness on a maybe dangerous diagonal to be doing that. So if that's a little too spicy for you, I'm not saying his move was a mistake. I kind of like it. I kind of like how risky it is. It's showing that Lasker is playing this game seriously. He could have also played, queen d7 and unified his rooks. And certainly nothing wrong with that. And if you're white, you want to use all your pieces. You get a rook into the d file with black's queen. And if you're black, you also want to use all your pieces, so you get a rook into the file with white's queen, right? And then maybe bishop e3, targeting, black's best minor piece right now. And probably just best to trade. And I think, white has a small edge thanks to this pawn, which is still a thorn in black's side, which is probably why Lasker did indeed opt to play f6. Let's get rid of that thorn right away. All right, so rook a to d1. We already talked about that. Touching a piece we haven't touched yet, and putting a rook in the same file as your opponent's queen. But, what happens if you just take the f6 pawn? Now, I think Lovegrove probably figured that Lasker, the great Emanuel Lasker, wouldn't offer that capture, wouldn't have played f6 if it resulted in a good position for white. But actually, if you take that pawn on f6, queen comes out, takes back, then you play a4, again undermining that b5 pawn, and then, maybe knight a5, threatening this bishop. Looks like white's got an edge still. Question is, what do we do about our bishop here, right? Well, maybe nothing right now. Maybe we just play bishop g5, threatening their queen. Yeah, and then, got to save the queen, and then we can move our bishop, and our bishop has an eye way down there. I like white's position here. I like white's position. So, in fact, Lovegrove could have taken on f6. He could have, but he played 13 rook a d1, and then knight takes on e5. And that seems best because it's moving a knight closer to white's king and threatening a trade where maybe you can end up with some two center pawns, even for a little bit. But maybe I see one game. I don't know if I want to show this entire thing, but let's see. It's kind of interesting that there is another game here that followed this exact, this position occurred in another chess game. So maybe, and fx e5 was played, and then knight g5, and that was played in Sorbero Giovanni versus Innocente Giovanni, and this was played in the Forni di Sopra International Open in Italy in 2012. White ended up better. So, but you know what? I like Lasker's move. It's just interesting that there was another game in my database that appeared. Knight takes, pawn takes. For a moment, black has two center pawns. For a moment, but then the queen takes, and now white has a queen, strong queen in the center of the board. Lasker says, nope, can't have that. Queen takes and bishop takes. And after all those captures, we're basically equal. We're basically equal right here. In fact, I might like black's position a little better just for personal preference. I'm sure it truly is equal, but just my preference might be to play black right now. But very equal position. So white moves a rook to an open file, and black needs another defender for this guy, so king moves closer, defends the bishop, gets closer to the center of the board as well. Bishop e3. So Lovegrove's improving the scope of this bishop, right? It sees a lot more squares there. And then pawn to c6. Okay, d5 is very secure now. Well, with d5 being so secure, Lovegrove plays bishop c2, improving the scope of his other bishop. And let's see, rook a to e8. I don't think you would want to take on over here because you'd get trapped in there, right? So that's what Lasker's doing here. He's moving the piece he hasn't moved yet, and there's a teeny trap of getting your bishop stuck over there. But, you know, Lovegrove's no fish. That's why we're talking about him. He plays a4. There he goes. Back to that undermining of that B pawn, challenging Black's queenside spatial advantage. It's a nice move. Bishop G4 improves the bishop, threatening the rook. So Lovegrove interposes with a pawn, so Lasker has to retreat. And, you know, moving Freddie to do that right now isn't so bad because the queens are off the board. Bishop goes to D7. And that's interesting. He's keeping, he chose putting his bishop on the diagonal that the pawn tension is on between A4 and B5. And that's something we should notice. Lasker plays great chess. It's something, you know, when a great player like Lasker has some choices of where to put this bishop and he goes there, we can learn why and learn a lot. Let's see. King F2. So Lovegrove sensing the forthcoming piece trades and dual flank pawn ending. He wants his king near the center. Rook to E7. Lasker's thinking, battery time. AX B5. So with Lasker preparing to, you know, his heavy pieces toward the center, Lovegrove's attacking on the flank. This is also something that is quite common in chess strategy. If your opponent is, you know, threatening stuff in the center, you can strike back on the flank. Let's see. AX B5. Lasker takes back. And you don't want a second. He needs to. He didn't necessarily want a second open file because he's preparing to stack his rooks, but he needs to take back toward the center. Otherwise, he's just got a isolated pawn in the middle that will be real problematic. Plus, it's usually correct to take back toward the center. Usually. Let's see. And now we have Lovegrove plays bishop G5. Threatening the rook, which doesn't allow Lasker. It's throwing a wrench into his plans to build the battery because now this rook's under attack. So Lasker says, fine, no battery. Rook takes E1. And Lovegrove, of course, plays rook takes E1. And now comes B4, which is a fine move, you know, all things considered. But maybe putting this rook over in the A file. See, if White's going to have the E file for a rook, I think Black would probably want to have an open file of their own. But Lasker's creating some more action over here. On the side of the board he still has more space on. And White plays bishop D2. And this could be considered a mistake by Lovegrove. And the reason is, yes, his rook is in an open file, but Black's king is guarding the critical squares in this file. I mean, this rook cannot go very many places. Look, pawn, bishop, king, king, bishop, rook, yeah, like all those squares. Maybe, you know, bringing your rook over to a far away open file where you could get a pin on this bishop looks really good to me. I think if you're Black here, if you're Lasker, you got to play rook b8 because this gives you support here, possible open b file, and something that can, you know, potentially step in the way. White king still probably wants to get closer to the center, but you don't want to You don't want to like step into a tactic. Um, bxc3, bxc3, and then maybe bishop takes h2. Maybe Lasker can just safely grab that pawn. Bishop takes h7 looks dangerous because again you could get trapped in here, right? Looks dangerous. But here comes that rook. Remember, you put that rook there. Rook b2 check. King can go... I think f1's probably best, to be honest. You want to defend this pawn. Bishop can go back to... Well, this is really complex. This is really complex. But and it certainly could have happened. I don't want to go too deep here. Let's get back to the actual game. So, Lovegrove didn't put a rook in the A file. He played bishop d2. Maybe some of these things that I was showing you he saw and was a little afraid of. And Lasker, he could just take if he wanted to. But rook b8 is what he plays. What would happen if he just takes? We should take a look at that. This is a major decision by Lasker here. So if b takes, I mean, you could take with your pawn or your bishop here. If you take with the pawn, then black doesn't have any passed pawns. You take with the bishop, your bishop's on a much better diagonal. Let's look at takes with the pawn first. I think rook a8, you know, grab an open file way, way far away. Bishop d3. You don't want two things in the forthcoming pin, so you gotta get a bishop, you know, out of the way. And then maybe you start advancing this guy down because your bishops are aimed this way. You're going to get a rook over here. I think, you know, maybe h5. Well, I could say h4. I don't like what you're thinking. In fact, you know, like if h4 is played, then there's like, let's say you played a mistake. You played like this, and then black gets h4 in. They're threatening bishop g3. See, so that could be bad. So h4 is played just to stop that. I don't like the looks of that coming my way. And then black could go to a2, but they could also go to a3. King e2. King has to get in there to defend. Rook can go to a2 now, pinning. And then rook goes to c1. So that's what happened if you took back with the pawn. And it seems to leave white playing defense. White's the one defending. So Lovegrove wouldn't have liked that. Now, let's see what happens if we... This is if the pawn had just taken. If Lasker had just taken. If bishop takes, what do you suppose? Well, maybe bishop c5 check. That looks tasty. You grab this diagonal with a check. King goes to f1. And then now the rook can go to a8. And I like black's pass pawn and rook in the a file. I have to say black has a better position here. So if our analysis is correct, it means, you know, Lasker maybe should have done this, but he played rook b8. Move 26, rook b8. Why? Oh, good. I'm correct. That's why chess.com won't let me promote it, because it's already where it should be. All right. So rook b8, adding support. The b file is very dangerous as well, and is farther away from the kings. So bishop goes to c1, which maybe this is a little inaccuracy too. What we need to do is look at what happens? What happens if we just take? Well, of course this could do this, right? And then you could do this. I mean, this is very basic calculation. But then, instead of like defending this pawn where it is, you could scoot it forward one. And then you have the bishop defending it. And this seems okay. Again, h5 can get played. But, you know, rook a1. This seems okay. This seems okay. h5 means now white's not going to play g4. It's going to take him longer. This seems good for white. So Lovegrove could have taken there. He did not, though. He played bishop to c1. And again, it's a good move. It's just not necessarily the best move. And when you're playing Lasker, you know, little differences matter like that. Lasker plays bishop e7, which is a safe move. And it leaves this tension here. Leaves the tension between the two pawns. I like to, you know, leave tension on the board too, and we've seen Lasker do this a couple times. Tension means complexity. If you resolve tension right away, you're making the position less complex. If you like if you favor yourself as a chess player, you know, leaving some tension means things are more complicated. Bishop f4. So Lovegrove decides it's time to use his defensive bishop for more offensive duties. Rook a8. Rook goes to the a file. This is a very dangerous open file because it's far removed from white's king's ability to, you know, take squares away from that rook. It's an outside open file. Sometimes we talk about outside passed pawns. This is an outside open file. Open file on the flank. Bishop goes to e5. And now we see Lovegrove's ingenious idea was to actually use his bishop defensively and offensively. That's quite clever. This is quite clever. Black plays bishop f6. Lasker can't allow white to have such a strong bishop. Bishop takes and king takes, and then king's coming closer. Lovegrove wants his king near the center of the board for this endgame. But the timing is a bit off here because it allows black to use his rook to pin the b2 pawn, right? And so I think cxb4 looks better right here. I think cxb4, and then I think if you're Lasker, you want to move your rook back to the b file. You left it there because white wasn't capturing. You moved out of it because white wasn't capturing. Now you want to be in the file with the two weak pawns. White could play g4 because black hasn't played h5 yet. But, you know, honestly, black could still play h5 if they want to. Black could still play h5. And why? Because then if this goes here, right? And then b3, again, using the bishop to defend the pawn. It's not the best use of a bishop, but it's better than using a rook to defend the pawn. It's a cheaper piece. And then black could play c5. And this is interesting. White may have an extra pawn, but they're all isolated. So I would say this is equal. They're easy targets. Okay, let's get back to our actual game though. Back to 31, king e3. Lovegrove gets his king closer to the center. And Lasker plays, here it comes, rook a2. pinning the b pawn to the bishop there, right? So he takes advantage of Lovegrove's miscue. Cx b4, and then rook takes b2, and now this is a fork. See, that's worse than, you know, having the rook here bearing down on it. Bishop takes h7. Whoa. Lovegrove goes for it. Good for him. G6. Lasker's going to close that diagonal off and maybe trap this bishop. Look at this. You can trap the bishop just with your king. So Lovegrove had to have known that possibility when he did that. And so he reacts to that problem with h4. Now, this is all part of his plan. Now, alternatively, I mean, you could continue moving toward the center, but you would have to really think deep. You would have to really think deep here. And the reason is because if king goes to d4 and this goes here, you have that, right? But if king goes to d4, what if black plays rook c2? Well, white could play b5, rook c4, check. King goes back to e3. Cx b5. This is looking very dangerous. But give me a minute. Bishop g8. Bishop escapes and is threatening a pinned pawn to the rook. Black defends, king e5. Bishop f7, and now you're threatening this as well as pinning that to the rook. This is why I said you have to look really deep. Because then, king d2, wait. It's black's move, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe g5, save the pawn. Then king d2, check. King d6 avoids more checks. Rook b1 starts, threatening the black's most dangerous pawn. But it's defended by bishop, so, rook a4. Now this rook's threatening to come down here, so you want the bishop to be on a more useful diagonal. Interesting. Black's king could go to c5. Bishop d3, doubling up on the dangerous pawn again. b4, scooting it forward. Passed pawns must be pushed. Rook c1, check. Yep, we have a check. And then king goes d6. I think this looks drawish. Complicated, but drawish. But you had to really calculate deep. Certainly both these players were capable of that kind of calculation. But Lovegrove played h4 in response to the threat of his bishop being trapped, not ignoring the threat for a moment and playing king d4. So, all right. Let's see. And then rook takes b4, g4, king g7, trapping white's bishop, and then watch Lovegrove. He doesn't freak out. He plays king f2. He knows that if black's king takes this bishop, he gets a fork and gets this bishop, right? Beautiful, beautiful stuff. In fact, it's now it's white threatening to win a bishop here, because if this says check, his bishop would be defended when he takes the other. So Lovegrove is definitely up for these levels of complications. He's more than holding his own against Lasker, and this is very impressive, which is why we're looking at this game. Rook goes to b7. By bringing his rook back to defend this bishop, Lasker puts a stop to that threat, right? But Lovegrove plays it anyways. Check, because it defends his bishop. It's defending the trap bishop through the king. King goes to f6, threatening the rook now. Rook goes to e1. And now the rook's safe on the e-file. Bishop goes to c8. So the bishop moves out of the way, and now the rook's threatening white's bishop. But watch this. This is cute. Rook e8. Now white's rook's also threatening black's bishop. Complicated stuff. So Lasker plays bishop takes g4. He takes out a pawn. So he's accepting the trade proposal, but not in a straightforward manner, right? If you take back like this goes here, and black has extra pawns and two protected pass pawns. So guess what Lovegrove does? He plays bishop takes this. Now white has a pass pawn too. These guys are playing fascinating chess with just rooks and bishops. Bishop d7. And it moves to a safe square with the threat of its own against the rook, obviously. Rook goes to g8. Boy, these are the kinds of positions where you could get outplayed by a player like Lasker unless you're a really good chess player, and Lovegrove is. So he moves the threatened rook, but he's defending his weak bishop, right? Bishop goes to e6, threatening the rook again. See, Lasker's putting him under some pressure here. And then rook e8 is like, go ahead, man, take my bishop, I'll take yours. He keeps finding ways to not lose material. So Lasker says, fine, c5. Pass pawns must be pushed. And Lovegrove says, fine, pass pawns must be pushed. h5. c4, oh boy. C-pawn is inching closer to its goal. h6. But so is the h-pawn. Wait, can't king just take g6? Yes, but then rook takes bishop, right? And why does Lasker wait now to do that? Well, he doesn't want this pawn to move forward and have the bishop supporting it, right? If it goes there and the bishop's supporting it, then it can go there and the rook's supporting it. So he has to. He has to get rid of the support for the pawn, the h-pawn, moving to the 7th rank. He has to eliminate that. Good question to the person who asked that. Yeah, I'm doing this lesson live. Black's in check, king f5. Rook goes to e8. Rook moves to safety. But it can also, it's in the e-file, but it can also get behind black's pass pawns. Rooks belong behind pass pawns, and it's also still defending the goal square, h8. Rook goes to h7. Lasker wants that remaining threat. He wants to get rid of that. King goes to e3. Lovegrove makes his move toward d4. Rook takes h6. King goes to d4. And that is the perfect blockading square. White's king is perfectly placed for this endgame. Rook goes to d6, defends the pawn. It's the only way to defend the pawn. since white's rook is controlling the e-file. Rook f8, check. Black's king has to move out of that file, goes g5. King to e5. Lovegrove kings takes opposition. The kings are opposing each other. Lasker plays d4. He's playing for the win, but he miscalculates badly. This is a double question mark. With precise play, a draw could have been achieved, but Lasker thought he could play. He could get away with d4 here, meaning he thought that I could give away my rook and end up promoting a pawn. We're going to find out why that doesn't work. He must have calculated that position for quite some time. But let me show you what he should have done. When the white king, when Lovegrove's king comes up here and is threatening the rook, you simply, and I'm sure he looked at this, you simply need to move your rook backwards, right? And now this rook could get behind this pawn, so it's not advancing a square. Well, d4 goes forward. Rook takes c4. Rook says check. Remember, the two kings were in opposition. It works for both sides, whoever is checking. King goes to d4, and we're getting close to a draw now. Some of you might see how to do it. King goes to f4. Here's another opposition. Rook goes to c5. Now the king can't move backwards. King takes f3. There's no other way to defend this pawn, right? Because if you try and do it like this, then check, and then check, and then smack, boom, bang, right? So this was Lasker's draw. It was his draw to be had. If he plays rook d7, steps out of the threat. But instead, he plays d4. He plays a very bold move. But it's a bold mistake. And Lovegrove doesn't need to be asked twice to take the rook. He does. d3, here comes the big threat, right? Two connected pass pawns. And now, there's only one way to win this game as white. You have to be very precise. Very precise. If I wasn't already kind of over the amount of time that I was expecting to spend on this live lesson, I'd give you a few minutes to think of it. But we're running a bit behind. Lovegrove steps back into opposition. He's moving closer, but doing it while stepping into opposition. d2. Whoa, look how close that is. Look how close it is. Rook g8, check. It's the only move that works. King has to go to the h file. King h4. King f4. Now he's threatening checkmate. Now he's threatening checkmate. King goes to h3. And now the black's king's way over here and white's king's here. Now he returns. Rook goes to d8. c3, defending the pawn. King goes to e3. And now there's no way for black to promote. If this goes forward, king's going to take, right? And white's got an extra rook. So Lasker resigns. Resigns here. His big risky move was a mistake. And to Lovegrove's credit, he didn't just win this because Lasker made a mistake. No, Lasker put a ton of pressure on him, played a very complex game. And Lovegrove hung in there the whole time. And Lasker thought he thought that after this, he could win. That there's no way to stop this pawn because it's 2 steps away. The rook cannot jump, and the king's in the way of the d file, right? He thought he could win. He missed this idea. He missed that. The use of the opposition, threat of checkmate, and then triangulating the king back in. He missed that. Let's look at this real fast again. This is an amazing move by Lasker. Oops. An amazing move by Lasker. d4. Instead of just playing rook d7 and getting a draw. Scooting the pawn to d4. Allowing this to take. The king is now in the file with the pawn. So he advances to the 3rd rank. He's now just 2 steps away from a queen. And he knows this doesn't work, and he knows this doesn't work. Because there's a pawn and a king in the way. But he failed to see this. And Lovegrove wins. What an amazing game. What an amazing game. I want to thank everybody who stuck with me through that lesson. I think I'm going to fix my hair a little bit on the camera. I did a little too much head scratching in those variations, I suppose. Walter Romaine Lovegrove, incredible chess player. This is Lovegrove beating Emanuel Lasker, one of the greatest chess players who's ever lived. Great chess players would come to San Francisco, play Lovegrove, and Lovegrove would win. He gained the international respect beyond national. He gained international respect for the chess that was happening in San Francisco, in Northern California, at the Mechanics Institute. Once again, I really hope you enjoyed this lesson in our series of California historical chess figures. My name is Chris Torres. I'm a correspondence chess master, and I seriously enjoy chess history, and since I live in California, California chess history. And I will be doing more of these. But in the meantime, go back and look at the Selim Franklin lesson, the first that we did. California's, in my opinion, first great chess player. Go look at and then Selim Franklin passed the torch to Joseph Redding, our second great chess player. And you can see that video. And then we know that Walter Lovegrove beat Joseph Redding in a match 7-1. So he's our third of these great chess players. The torch got passed to him, and he ran with it. Go ahead, remember to like and subscribe, and then you will see me again soon. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. So long.